Deep in remote Asia, something forgotten stirs in the permafrost. We're tracking a solitary snow leopard that has just found a secret military relic. One side, this silent lord, this frozen frontier.
High in the silent mountains of remote Central Asia, winter ruled longer than any calendar could measure. Snow lay in deep folds across jagged ridges, covering ancient paths once walked by traders and soldiers. The air was thin and sharp, and even the wind seemed careful as it passed between stone peaks. In this frozen wilderness, where few humans traveled anymore, life moved quietly and cautiously. A snow leopard moved along a narrow ledge, placing each paw with careful precision. Its thick fur blended perfectly with the pale rocks and drifting snow, making it nearly invisible against the mountainside. These mountains had been its home since birth, a world of cliffs, caves, and hidden trails known only to animals that had survived here for generations. Long before the leopard was born, however, humans had climbed these same mountains for very different reasons. Decades earlier, during the tense years of the Cold War, powerful nations had competed for influence across Asia. Governments feared surprise attacks and secret weapons. In remote areas far from cities, engineers and soldiers were sent to build hidden installations. Some were radar stations, others were communication hubs, and a few were underground bunkers designed to survive disaster. One such bunker had been carved into the heart of these mountains. Construction began in secrecy during the early 1960s. Teams of workers arrived in military trucks, traveling narrow dirt roads that twisted along dangerous cliffs. The local villagers living in small settlements far below watched with curiosity and concern. They were told little, only that the government needed a secure facility to protect the nation. Soldiers guarded the area day and night. Supplies were brought in heavy wooden crates marked with codes rather than names. Inside the crates were steel beams, electrical cables, communication equipment, and machines designed to keep people alive underground for long periods of time. Workers used drills and explosives to carve tunnels deep into solid rock. The noise echoed through valleys that had once been silent except for wind and birds. Massive concrete walls were poured inside the mountain, reinforced with thick steel rods. Heavy metal doors were installed at the entrance, strong enough to withstand powerful blasts. The bunker was not meant to be seen. From the outside, it looked nothing more than a rough stone wall at the base of a steep slope. Engineers carefully shaped the outer rock to match the natural mountain surface. Camouflage nets were stretched across the area during construction, hiding the work from distant observation. Inside, however, the structure was complex. Long corridors stretched through the mountain, lined with electrical lights that hummed softly when powered on. Rooms were built for communication equipment, sleeping quarters, storage areas, and control stations. Large ventilation systems were installed to pull fresh air into the underground chambers. Generators were placed in reinforced rooms to supply electricity if outside power lines were destroyed. Maps covered the walls in the main control room. Radios were arranged in neat rows, ready to send messages across great distances. The bunker was designed to monitor air activity and transmit warnings if enemy aircraft approached. For several years, soldiers rotated through the facility. They lived underground for weeks at a time, maintaining equipment and watching signals that flashed across radar screens. Outside, harsh winters buried the mountains in snow, while summers brought short periods of melting ice and rushing streams. Despite its isolation, the bunker was considered an important part of national defense. But history changed faster than the builders expected. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, global tensions between major powers began to ease. Agreements were signed, weapons were reduced, and many secret facilities lost their importance. Governments faced economic challenges and shifted priorities. Maintaining remote mountain bunkers became expensive and unnecessary. Eventually, orders were given to shut the facility down. Soldiers packed essential equipment into trucks and sealed sensitive documents into locked containers. Some machinery was removed, but much of it remained behind due to the difficulty of transport. The final group of personnel performed routine shutdown procedures, switching off generators and sealing interior doors. Before leaving, engineers locked the main steel entrance and covered it with rocks and debris, hoping to hide the structure from curiosity or theft. Within months, nature began reclaiming the site. Snow drifted across the entrance year after year. Ice cracked small pieces of stone loose from the cliff above. Moss and lichen slowly spread across exposed surfaces. The narrow road that once carried trucks faded into a faint trail barely visible from above. Decades passed. Villages in the valleys below changed as younger generations moved toward cities. Old stories about secret construction in the mountains became little more than distant memories shared by elders during winter nights. Wildlife returned to the area in greater numbers. Mountain goats climbed the steep slopes without fear of engines or human noise. Birds nested in rocky outcrops near the abandoned entrance, and snow leopards, rare and cautious, once again made these peaks their hunting grounds. The leopard moving along the ledge this day knew nothing of Cold War politics or military strategy. It knew only the rhythm of survival, hunting, resting, and traveling across the vast range. Yet something unusual caught its attention. A scent drifted through the cold air, faint but unfamiliar. It was not the smell of prey or rival predators. It carried hints of rust, old metal, and something that did not belong to the natural world. Curious, the leopard paused. Below the ledge, partially hidden beneath snow and broken stones, a dark shape interrupted the smooth line of the mountain wall. Time and weather had buried most of it, but a narrow edge of metal still showed through. The animal lowered its head and listened. No sound came from the object, only wind whispered across the slopes. Still, the strange scent remained, pulling the leopard closer. Carefully, it descended from the ledge, claws gripping rough stone. Snow slid beneath its paws as it moved downward towards the unfamiliar structure. The closer it came, the clearer the shape became, flat, hard, and unlike anything found in nature. Half buried beneath years of snow and falling debris, the entrance to the forgotten Cold War bunker waited in silence. And for the first time in decades, something living had come close enough to notice it. The snow leopard moved slowly down the slope, its body low and balanced against the wind that swept across the mountain face. Each step pressed deep into the snow, leaving clear marks behind. The scent that had first caught its attention grew stronger as it approached the dark shape buried in the mountain wall. From a distance, the object had seemed like an odd rock formation, but up close it was clearly different. A flat surface, colder and smoother than stone, pushed through layers of snow and ice. Years of harsh winters had covered most of it, yet part of the structure remained visible. The leopard paused a few steps away. Its ears turned forward as it listened for movement. In these mountains, curiosity could be dangerous. Avalanches, hidden cliffs, and rival predators all demanded caution. But the strange structure did not move or make sound. It stood silent, as if frozen in time. Long ago, when the bunker had still been active, this entrance had been guarded carefully. Soldiers had stood watch here in heavy winter uniforms, scanning the horizon through binoculars. Floodlights once lit the area during the night, casting long shadows across the snow. Now, only broken memories of that activity remained. A thick metal door lay beneath layers of frozen debris. Snow had drifted across it season after season, and small rocks from above had piled against its lower edge. Rust had spread across exposed surfaces, leaving rough orange streaks where smooth gray metal once shone. The leopard stepped closer. Its whiskers brushed against the cold surface. The metal carried a faint scent, unlike anything in nature, an old scent of oil and iron that had lasted through decades of abandonment. The animal sniffed again, trying to understand the unfamiliar presence. Far inside the mountain, hidden behind that sealed door, empty corridors stretched into darkness. During the Cold War years, those corridors had been full of sound and motion. Generators rumbled constantly, sending steady vibrations through the walls. Radios crackled with distant signals. Footsteps echoed as soldiers moved from room to room, checking equipment and recording observations. At the height of its operation, the bunker functioned as a monitoring station. Radar antennas mounted on the ridge above once scanned the sky for aircraft movement. Thick cables ran from the antennas down into the bunker, carrying signals to control panels deep underground. Engineers designed the system to operate even during emergencies. Backup generators stood ready in reinforced rooms. Fuel tanks stored enough supplies to power the bunker for weeks without outside assistance. Ventilation shafts reached high above the main entrance, hidden among rocks, so that fresh air could flow inside unnoticed. Every detail had been planned carefully. But time had changed everything. Outside, the snow leopard walked slowly along the edge of the metal door. Its claws scraped lightly against ice that had formed along the seams. One corner of the structure had shifted slightly, likely pushed by falling rocks during past winters. A narrow gap had formed where snow and stone had loosened. Cold air drifted from the opening, carrying a dry, hollow scent from deep inside. The smell was different from the outside air, still and stale, as though it had been trapped underground for many years. The leopard leaned closer, sniffing the gap. Inside, darkness filled the tunnel beyond the door. Dust coated every surface. Tiny particles drifted through the air whenever wind slipped through cracks. Silence dominated the interior space, broken only by faint creaks as old metal slowly adjusted to changing temperatures. Years earlier, when the final group of soldiers prepared to leave, they had worked quickly but carefully. Some equipment had been dismantled and transported out. Radios, classified documents, and advanced instruments were considered too valuable to abandon, yet much remained. Heavy machines, too large to remove, had been left behind. Metal bunks stayed lined against sleeping quarters. Storage rooms still held crates filled with spare parts, wires, and mechanical tools. In the generator room, engines rested in darkness, their fuel long gone, but their presence unchanged. After the shutdown, engineers sealed the bunker as best they could. They locked interior doors and shut down ventilation fans. At the main entrance, they closed the heavy blast door and reinforced it with external supports. Then they piled stones and debris in front of it, hoping natural snowfall would complete the disguise. For many years, the hiding place worked. Even passing aircraft rarely noticed anything unusual in the endless white landscape. Satellite imaging improved over time, but without active signals or visible movement, the bunker remained just another shadow among rocks. Meanwhile, nature continued its quiet takeover. Ice formed inside cracks along the outer structure. When temperatures dropped at night, the ice expanded, slowly widening the gaps. During warmer months, melting water seeped deeper into the seams, weakening connections between metal and stone. Eventually, small openings began to appear. These changes were gradual, too slow for human observers to notice, but constant enough to reshape the entrance over decades. A corner bent slightly inward, a hinge loosened, dust gathered along the inner edges of the doorframe. Now, standing at the edge of one such opening, the snow leopard lifted its paw and placed it against the icy surface. The metal shifted slightly under the pressure. A faint scraping sound echoed into the darkness beyond.
The sound was soft but unusual, bouncing off the interior walls and traveling down empty corridors that had not heard movement in years. The leopard froze. Its muscles tightened as it listened for any response. But nothing came. The silence returned, heavy and complete. Encouraged by the lack of danger, the animal pushed forward once more. The narrow gap widened just enough for cold air to move freely between the outside world and the sealed interior. A small clump of frozen snow broke loose and slid into the opening, disappearing into darkness below. Far inside the bunker, that falling snow struck the concrete floor with a faint tap, one of the first new sounds in decades. Outside, clouds gathered above the mountain peaks. The wind strengthened, carrying loose snow across the slope. Visibility began to fade as fine white particles filled the air. The leopard remained near the entrance, still drawn by curiosity. It lowered its head and peered into the gap, eyes adjusting to the darkness. Though it could not see far, the scent from inside remained steady, dry, cold, and unfamiliar. Hidden beneath layers of snow and silence, the forgotten Cold War bunker waited patiently, holding its secrets deep inside the mountain. And step by step, the snow leopard was moving closer to discovering what had been left behind.
Snow swept across the mountainside as the wind grew stronger. Fine white particles filled the air, making the world seem smaller and quieter. The snow leopard stood at the edge of the narrow opening, its thick tail curling slightly behind for balance. The scent from inside the dark space remained steady, dry, dusty, and unlike anything found in nature. Carefully, the leopard lowered its head and leaned closer to the gap. Its eyes, built for low light, searched the darkness beyond the metal edge. At first, there was nothing but shadow, but as its vision adjusted, faint shapes began to form inside. A sloping floor led downward into the mountain. The entrance tunnel had once been wide enough for equipment carts and small utility vehicles. Now, much of the passage was buried beneath drifted snow and fallen debris. Broken pieces of stone lay scattered across the floor, and thin sheets of ice clung to the walls. Long ago, this tunnel had been brightly lit. Rows of electric lamps had lined the ceiling, glowing day and night. Soldiers entering the bunker would pass through this corridor after checking in at the surface post. Their boots had echoed against concrete floors as they carried supplies into storage rooms deeper underground. At the far end of the tunnel, a second heavy door had once sealed the interior from outside danger. This inner door had been designed to withstand shock waves and protect personnel inside. When both doors were closed, the bunker became nearly airtight, capable of surviving extreme conditions. Now, decades later, the outer door had shifted slightly, and cold mountain air had begun creeping inside. The snow leopard stepped forward, testing the narrow space. One paw slipped into the opening, pressing onto the frozen surface beyond. The ground felt firm, though colder than the snow outside. Encouraged, the animal shifted its weight and slid its body through the gap. Loose snow crumbled behind it as it entered. Inside the tunnel, the air felt still and heavy. The wind outside faded quickly, replaced by a quiet that felt deeper than silence. Even the smallest movement produced sound here. Tiny scratches of claws against concrete echoed softly along the walls. The leopard paused, listening carefully. Nothing moved within the tunnel. No scent of fresh prey or predators filled the air. Only the faint smell of dust and rust remained, lingering from a time long gone. Years earlier, the interior of this tunnel had been full of activity. Crates filled with supplies had once been stacked along the sides. Wooden boxes marked with codes held spare cables, machine parts, and protective equipment. Workers had rolled heavy barrels of fuel along metal carts, securing them inside reinforced storage rooms. Each delivery had been recorded carefully in logs. Military officers tracked inventory numbers, ensuring every item had a specific place and purpose.
During emergency drills, personnel practiced moving quickly through this tunnel, carrying protective masks and tools. Those drills were part of daily life during the Cold War. Fear of sudden attack shaped many decisions. Nations built underground shelters not only in cities, but also in remote locations like this mountain bunker. These facilities allowed communication networks to survive, even if surface structures were destroyed. Inside the tunnel now, dust coated the walls in a thin gray layer. Small cracks stretched along the ceiling where years of temperature changes had weakened the concrete. Tiny fragments of stone occasionally fell, landing quietly on the floor below. Water from melting snow had seeped inside over time, freezing into narrow streaks of ice that reflected faint light from the entrance. The snow leopard moved deeper. Its body remained low, muscles ready to react if danger appeared. Each step stirred dust that had not been disturbed for years. The particles floated briefly before settling again on the cold floor. About halfway down the tunnel, the animal noticed something unusual. A metal object lay tipped against the wall. It was small and rectangular, partially buried beneath dirt and rust flakes. Once it had been painted a dull green color, but now most of the paint had faded or chipped away. The leopard sniffed it cautiously, nose twitching at the unfamiliar smell. Long ago, this object had been a storage box. Inside similar containers, soldiers kept emergency supplies such as gloves, tools, and spare batteries. During routine checks, maintenance teams inspected each box to ensure equipment remained usable. These tasks were considered essential to keeping the bunker ready at all times. But after the facility was abandoned, the boxes were left where they stood. Some were damaged by moisture, others fell from stacked positions as the structure slowly shifted. Over the years, gravity and time rearranged many objects inside the bunker without any human presence. The leopard nudged the small metal box gently with its nose. It slid slightly across the floor, producing a sharp scraping sound that echoed loudly through the tunnel. The sudden noise startled the animal. Its ears flattened and it stepped back quickly, eyes scanning the darkness ahead. Still, nothing responded. The tunnel remained silent, except for the fading echo of metal against concrete. Farther ahead, the passage sloped downward more steeply. At the end of the visible corridor stood another large door, taller and thicker than the outer entrance. Its surface was coated with rust, and its edges were cracked with concrete. This was the inner blast door. During active years, this door had been kept sealed except during controlled entry periods. It protected the central areas of the bunker where the most sensitive equipment had been installed. Behind it lay communication rooms, sleeping quarters, and control stations that once monitored distant skies. Now the door stood slightly ajar. Not wide open, but enough to allow darkness from deeper inside to spread into the tunnel. One hinge appeared bent, likely weakened by years of pressure and shifting rock. A narrow gap ran along the bottom edge, where the door no longer fit perfectly into its frame. The snow leopard slowly approached. Its paws made soft tappings against the concrete, echoing through the still air. With each step, the scent of old metal grew stronger. Dust coated its whiskers as it moved closer to the second barrier. Outside, the storm continued building strength. Wind howled across the mountain slopes, piling fresh snow against the outer entrance. Soon, the narrow opening through which the leopard had entered would become even more hidden beneath drifting snow. Inside the bunker, however, the air remained steady and cold. The leopard reached the base of the inner blast door and paused again. Its head tilted slightly as it studied the narrow gap beneath the heavy metal edge. Beyond that gap lay the deeper heart of the forgotten Cold War bunker. Rooms that once held voices, machinery, and constant movement now rested in complete darkness, waiting silently after decades of abandonment. And with growing curiosity, the snow leopard prepared to move even farther inside.
The snow leopard stood quietly before the inner blast door, its breath slow and steady in the cold, still air. The narrow gap beneath the heavy metal edge allowed only a faint trace of deeper darkness to spill into the tunnel. Dust covered the floor around the doorway, undisturbed except for the fresh paw prints that now marked the path behind the animal. Carefully, the leopard lowered its head and sniffed near the bottom edge of the door. The scent here was stronger than before, thick with rust, old oil, and dry concrete. It was a scent that had lingered for decades without change. Long ago, this blast door had been a critical layer of protection. Engineers had designed it to seal tightly during emergencies. Thick rubber lining along the edges once ensured an airtight closure, preventing smoke, chemicals, or pressure waves from entering the central bunker. Massive steel hinges supported the weight of the door, allowing it to swing open only with significant force. During normal operations, guards controlled access through this doorway. Only authorized personnel were allowed to pass into the central command areas. Each entry was recorded in written logs. Soldiers on duty checked identification cards and confirmed schedules before allowing anyone inside. Now, years of neglect had changed the structure. One hinge had weakened slowly as winter ice expanded and contracted around the frame. Over time, the pressure bent the metal slightly outward. The once tight seal loosened, leaving just enough space beneath the door for small drafts of air to move through. The snow leopard pressed one paw gently against the lower edge. The metal responded with a faint creaking sound. The noise echoed into the darkness beyond, bouncing off distant walls and returning as a soft, hollow whisper. The leopard froze again, muscles tense, listening for any movement deeper inside. None came. Encouraged by the silence, the animal pushed forward again. Its strong shoulders pressed against the edge, forcing the door to shift slightly. Rust flakes broke loose and scattered across the floor, sliding into the gap below. Slowly, the opening widened. The door did not swing fully open, but it moved just enough to allow space for the leopard to squeeze through. With careful movement, the animal lowered its body and slipped beneath the heavy barrier. On the other side, the air felt even colder. This area of the bunker had remained sealed longer than the outer tunnel. Dust lay thick on every surface, forming soft layers across the floor. The leopard paused just inside, allowing its eyes to adjust once more to the deeper darkness. Shapes began to form around it. A long corridor stretched ahead, branching into several side passages. The walls were lined with pipes and cables, many hanging loosely after years of disuse. Some wires had fallen from their mounts, resting in tangled clusters near the floor. Decades earlier, this corridor had been brightly illuminated. Electric lights mounted along the ceiling once cast steady light across polished floors. Workers moved through this hallway carrying documents and equipment. Officers held quiet conversations while studying reports from radar stations and communication posts. At the far end of the hallway, metal signs had once guided personnel toward different rooms, control centers, sleeping quarters, storage areas, and technical spaces. Most of those signs still remained, though their lettering had faded. The snow leopard stepped forward, placing its paws gently against the dusty surface. Each movement created soft prints that stood out clearly against the gray coating. The silence here felt deeper than before, as if the walls themselves had grown used to stillness. To the left, an open doorway revealed a small room. Inside, several metal beds stood arranged in neat rows. Thin mattresses rested on their frames, covered in layers of dust. Blankets lay folded at the ends, preserved in their original positions as if waiting for occupants to return. This room had once served as sleeping quarters. During active operations, soldiers rested here in rotating shifts.
Some worked overnight while others slept during daylight hours. The constant hum of machinery had filled the air, creating a steady background noise that became familiar to those stationed inside. Personal belongings once filled these spaces. Photographs from home, letters from family members, and small items of comfort were kept near beds. These reminders helped soldiers endure long weeks in isolation from the outside world. After the bunker closed, many personal items were removed, but not everything was taken. The leopard glanced briefly into the room before continuing forward. Its attention shifted toward another doorway farther down the corridor. This next room was larger. Inside stood several tall metal cabinets, their doors slightly open. Shelves inside held scattered objects, papers, tools, and small mechanical parts. Some pages had fallen onto the floor, where moisture from past winters had curled their edges. These cabinets once stored operational records. Technicians documented every maintenance task performed inside the bunker. Daily reports recorded system checks, fuel levels, and equipment performance. During emergency drills, detailed notes tracked response times and communication accuracy. All of these records were once considered important, but as years passed and priorities changed, many were left behind during the final shutdown. The snow leopard stepped into the larger room, its tail moving slowly behind it. A faint draft brushed against its fur, carrying a soft rustling sound from deeper within the structure. Somewhere farther inside, air still moved through hidden shafts. These ventilation systems had been built to circulate fresh mountain air into underground chambers. Even after years of abandonment, small openings remained functional, allowing wind from outside to travel through narrow passages. That faint movement of air carried with it new scents, different from the entrance tunnel. The leopard lifted its head, sniffing carefully. Among the smells of dust and rust, another faint odor appeared, one that hinted at materials stored deeper within the bunker. It was not fresh, but it was stronger than before. Drawn by curiosity, the animal turned toward a wider hallway branching to the right. This passage sloped gently downward, leading toward the central chambers of the bunker. The floor here showed signs of past movement, deep grooves where heavy equipment had once been rolled from room to room. At the end of the slope, a large reinforced doorway stood open. Beyond it lay the heart of the facility. Years ago, this central area had housed the main control room, the operational center, where radar signals were received and interpreted. Now, that room waited in darkness. The snow leopard moved slowly toward the open doorway, its senses alert. Each step carried it deeper into a place that had not seen living movement in decades. Outside, the snowstorm continued building strength, sealing the entrance further beneath drifting snow. Inside the mountain, the forgotten bunker revealed more of its hidden past, one silent room at a time.
The snow leopard stepped carefully through the wide, reinforced doorway, entering the largest space it had seen so far. The air inside felt heavier than in the hallways behind it, thick with dust that had settled over many years. Its paws left fresh marks across the gray floor, tracing a path into the heart of the bunker. This room had once been the central control room. During the Cold War years, this space had served as the operational center of the entire facility. Officers and technicians worked here in shifts, watching equipment that tracked signals from far beyond the mountains. Large consoles once filled the room, each covered in switches, dials, and display screens. Now the consoles remained in silence. Several long rows of equipment stood in place, their surfaces coated in thick layers of dust. Metal chairs rested beside them, pushed back as if someone had stood up quickly and never returned. Wires hung loosely from the backs of machines, some trailing along the floor like lifeless vines.
The snow leopard paused near the center of the room. Its ears rotated slowly as it listened. The silence here felt deeper than anywhere else in the bunker so far. Even the faint drafts of air seemed weaker, unable to disturb the stillness that had settled into every corner. Decades earlier, this room had been full of activity. Operators sat at their stations wearing headsets, listening to incoming transmissions. Radar screens displayed moving lines and flashing signals that represented distant aircraft. When unfamiliar signals appeared, technicians recorded the information quickly and passed it to supervising officers. Every detail mattered. During times of heightened tension, even small changes in signal patterns could trigger alerts. Personnel were trained to react immediately, checking coordinates and verifying data before sending messages to command centers located far away. The snow leopard walked along one of the equipment rows. It lifted its head and sniffed near the edge of a console. The scent of old electrical wiring lingered faintly, mixed with the sharp smell of rusted metal. Though the machines had been silent for decades, traces of their past operation remained. One large screen still hung on the far wall. Once, it had displayed maps showing regional air routes and observation zones. Colored markings indicated sectors assigned to different monitoring stations. Communication lines connected this bunker to other facilities across the region, forming part of a wider defense network. When the Cold War began to wind down, many such systems were shut off. Governments reassessed their priorities, shifting funds toward modernization and civilian infrastructure. Remote bunkers like this one became less necessary as technology improved and satellite systems replaced older radar methods. During the final shutdown here, technicians followed detailed procedures. Sensitive components were removed from key machines to prevent unauthorized use. Portable communication units were packed into crates and transported down the mountain. However, large stationary equipment remained, as removing it would have required extensive time and effort. After the equipment was disabled, power systems were switched off one by one. Generators fell silent, lights dimmed, screens darkened until only shadows remained in the room. The last personnel checked each station before leaving, ensuring no signals continued to transmit. Now, years later, the snow leopard stood where officers once gathered during long shifts. Its tail brushed lightly against a chair, causing the metal legs to scrape faintly across the floor. The sudden sound echoed across the wide chamber, bouncing off distant walls before fading into silence again. The leopard stopped moving. Its muscles tightened, ready to react if necessary. But nothing answered the noise. The room remained still, as it had been for decades. Near the back wall, a long table rested beneath a large faded map. The paper map had curled slightly along its edges. Dust covered its surface, but faint lines and markings could still be seen beneath the gray coating. These markings once showed nearby mountain ranges, air corridors, and communication relay points. Maps like this were updated regularly during active years. Officers used colored pencils to mark changes in observation zones or note unusual activity. Reports from other stations were recorded and stored in nearby cabinets. Every observation formed part of a larger system designed to monitor movement across vast distances. The snow leopard approached the table slowly. Its whiskers brushed against the edge, disturbing a thin layer of dust. Tiny particles lifted into the air before settling again on the floor. Beneath the table lay several small objects that had fallen long ago. Among them rested a cylindrical metal container. The leopard sniffed it cautiously, nose twitching at the unfamiliar smell. The container had once held spare batteries used to power small communication tools. Over time, corrosion had spread along its surface, leaving dark patches where the metal had weakened. Beyond the central area, another hallway extended deeper within the bunker. This corridor led to additional specialized rooms, spaces that once housed generators, fuel storage tanks, and ventilation controls. These areas had been critical to keeping the bunker functional during emergencies. After active years, technicians inspected these systems daily. Fuel levels were recorded carefully. Air filters were cleaned to maintain steady airflow. Backup systems were tested regularly to ensure reliability in case of power failure. Now those systems stood inactive. The snow leopard turned toward the deeper hallway, drawn once again by curiosity. The faint draft that moved through the bunker carried subtle sounds from far below, soft, distant noises created by shifting metal and settling dust. Each sound echoed strangely through the structure, as if the bunker itself remembered its past activity. Outside, the storm continued to grow stronger. Snow piled against the hidden entrance, covering the opening almost completely. Wind carved fresh ridges across the mountainside, erasing the leopard's earlier tracks. Soon, the path back outside would be harder to see. Inside the bunker, the leopard stepped into the next corridor. The passage sloped downward more steeply than before, leading toward areas built deeper within the mountain. Pipes lined the walls, many wrapped in faded insulation. Some had cracked open, leaving rough edges where material had broken away. At the bottom of the slope, another large room waited. A faint metallic smell drifted from that direction, stronger than anywhere else the leopard had explored so far. This scent carried hints of oil and fuel, remnants of machinery used to power the bunker's systems. The snow leopard slowed its steps as it approached. Ahead lay the generator room, one of the most important sections of the entire facility during its years of operation. And within that dark space, more silent evidence of the bunker's forgotten past waited to be discovered.
The snow leopard moved slowly down the sloping corridor, its paws making soft tapping sounds against the cold concrete floor. The air grew heavier with each step, carrying a stronger scent of old oil and metal. The smell was sharp compared to the dusty stillness of the control room behind it. Ahead, the corridor opened into another large chamber. The leopard paused at the entrance, lowering its head slightly as it looked inside. Shapes of large machines filled the room, standing motionless in the darkness. Thick shadows surrounded them, broken only by faint gray light that followed the animal from the hallway. This was the generator room. During the bunker's active years, this space had been one of the most important areas in the entire facility. Without electricity, none of the radar systems, communication equipment, or ventilation systems could function. Engineers had installed multiple backup generators here to ensure that power would remain available even during emergencies. Now, those machines stood silent. The snow leopard stepped into the room carefully. Its claws scraped lightly against the concrete as it walked past the first large generator. The machine towered above the animal, built from thick steel and heavy pipes. Rust had spread across its surface, leaving rough patches where smooth metal once shined. Long ago, this room was loud. Generators produced a steady rumbling sound that vibrated through the walls and floors. Workers wore protective ear coverings to reduce the noise while performing maintenance. The smell of fuel had once filled the air, mixing with the warmth generated by running engines. Technicians checked these machines daily. Fuel tanks connected to the generators through thick hoses. Valves controlled the flow of diesel into the engines. Temperature gauges allowed workers to monitor heat levels and prevent overheating. Each part of the system required careful attention to remain reliable. The snow leopard moved closer to one of the machines.
A long metal pipe extended from its side, running upward toward the ceiling. Years of inactivity had caused the pipe's outer covering to crack and peel. In some places, the insulation had fallen off completely, exposing the bare metal beneath. Near the far wall stood a row of tall cylindrical tanks. These tanks had once stored fuel that powered the generators. Their surfaces were coated in dust and rust, but their shapes remained solid and unmoving. Faded warning symbols could still be seen painted on their sides, though the colors had nearly disappeared with time. During the bunker's final shutdown, technicians had drained much of the fuel from these tanks. Leaving large amounts of fuel behind could have created safety risks. Some residue remained inside the tanks, but most usable fuel had been transported away before the facility was sealed. The snow leopard sniffed the air again. The scent here was different from anywhere else in the bunker, heavier, thicker, and more metallic. Though decades had passed, traces of fuel still lingered faintly within the room. Near one of the generators, a small metal toolbox lay on the floor. Its lid had fallen open, revealing scattered tools inside. Wrenches, screwdrivers, and measuring devices rested exactly where they had been left. Dust coated their surfaces, but their shapes remained clear. Long ago, a technician had likely used these tools during routine maintenance. Generator inspections were scheduled regularly to prevent failure. Workers checked oil levels, tightened bolts, and replaced worn parts. Each completed task was recorded in maintenance logs stored in nearby offices. When the bunker was abandoned, some tools were packed and removed. Others, like this toolbox, were left behind due to time limits and the difficulty of transporting heavy equipment down the mountain. The snow leopard stepped carefully around the toolbox. Its tail brushed against one of the metal tanks, producing a faint hollow sound. The echo echoed across the chamber, louder than expected in the quiet space. The leopard froze. Its ears lifted sharply as it listened for any response. The echo faded slowly into silence, leaving the room still more once. Far above, hidden ventilation shafts connected this room to the outside mountain air. Though fans had stopped working decades earlier, natural airflow still traveled through narrow passages. These slow drafts carried faint sounds from distant parts of the bunker. The leopard noticed another doorway at the far side of the generator room. Unlike the wide corridors behind it, this passage led into a narrower passage. Pipes lined both sides of the walls, and sections of broken insulation lay scattered across the floor. This passage had once connected the generator room to storage areas. Inside those storage spaces, technicians kept spare machine parts, oil containers, and emergency repair materials. Having these supplies nearby allowed quick repairs if equipment failed during critical operations. The snow leopard walked toward the narrow passage. Its whiskers brushed lightly against the rough edges of cracked insulation as it passed through the doorway. The air inside felt cooler again, with less of the heavy fuel scent from the generator room. As it moved deeper into the passage, the floor became uneven. Small pools of frozen water had formed where melting snow seeped through cracks in the ceiling. Over many winters, these leaks created thin layers of ice that spread slowly along the ground. Carefully, the leopard adjusted its steps to avoid slipping. At the end of the passage, another room appeared. This space was smaller than the generator chamber, but filled with stacked crates and metal shelving units. Some shelves had collapsed, causing boxes to fall into scattered piles. Wooden boards from broken crates lay across the floor. These were the storage rooms. During active years, supplies stored here supported daily operations throughout the bunker. Replacement parts, spare wires, and protective materials filled these containers. Labels once marked each box clearly, allowing workers to locate needed items quickly. Now many labels had faded or peeled away. Moisture from leaking pipes had damaged paper tags and weakened wooden boards. Some crates had split open completely, spilling their contents across the floor. The snow leopard paused near one of the fallen stacks. A faint metallic clink sounded as its paw touched a loose object beneath the debris. The noise echoed softly around the room. Outside the mountain, the storm continued building strength, covering the bunker entrance deeper beneath snow. The outside world was becoming more distant with every passing hour. Inside, the leopard remained unaware of the growing storm. Its attention stayed fixed on the unfamiliar environment around it. Each new room revealed more silent reminders of the bunker's past, evidence of human effort now left to fade beneath layers of dust and time. Beyond the storage room, another dark corridor stretched even deeper into the mountain, and within that unexplored space, more hidden sections of the forgotten Cold War bunker waited in silence.
The snow leopard stepped carefully across the uneven floor of the storage room, its paws brushing against scattered pieces of wood and metal. Each movement created faint sounds that echoed softly through the enclosed space. The air here felt colder than before, carrying the scent of damp concrete and aging materials. Beyond the fallen crates, another narrow corridor stretched forward into darkness. The leopard paused at the entrance, lifting its head to listen. The silence remained deep and unbroken. Only the faint whisper of moving air drifted through hidden ventilation shafts somewhere above. Long ago, this section of the bunker had been used less frequently than the central control areas. While the control room and generator chamber were active nearly every hour of the day, these deeper passages served more specialized purposes. Engineers designed additional rooms farther inside the mountain to store sensitive equipment and emergency supplies that were not needed during normal operations. The snow leopard stepped into the corridor. The walls here appeared rougher than those in earlier sections. Instead of smooth concrete surfaces, parts of the stone had been left partially exposed. Engineers had reinforced key structural points, but allowed some natural rock to remain visible where it provided stability. Thin cables still ran along the walls, secured by metal brackets. Some brackets had loosened over time, allowing wires to sag toward the floor. Dust covered everything, forming a dull gray coating across surfaces that once appeared clean and orderly. As the leopard moved forward, the passage curved slightly to the right. At the end of the bend stood a heavy metal door, smaller than the earlier blast doors, but still solid and reinforced. Its surface showed deep scratches and patches of rust, suggesting years of pressure and weather damage. Unlike the previous doors, this one stood fully open. Beyond it lay another chamber. The snow leopard approached slowly, lowering its body as it crossed the threshold. Inside, the room revealed a collection of metal shelves arranged along the walls. Unlike the storage room behind, these shelves held fewer items, but the objects that remained appeared carefully arranged. This had once been an equipment archive. During the Cold War years, certain tools and devices were stored separately due to their importance. Engineers kept spare communication units, testing instruments, and calibration tools in controlled environments to protect them from damage. Some of those instruments still rested on the shelves. Small metal boxes, circular gauges, and coiled cables remained exactly where they had been placed decades earlier. Dust covered their surfaces, but their arrangement suggested careful planning and organization. Near the center of the room stood a tall cabinet. Its glass front had cracked, forming jagged patterns across the surface. Inside the cabinet rested several notebooks and folders, stacked neatly together. These notebooks once held technical instructions. Engineers used them to record maintenance procedures, wiring diagrams, and calibration steps for sensitive equipment.
Detailed instructions allowed trained personnel to repair systems quickly if problems occurred during emergencies. Over time, moisture had crept into the cabinet through small cracks. Some of the paper pages had curled and faded, ink markings blurred where water had touched the surface. Yet many pages remained intact, preserved by the dry air that filled most of the bunker. The snow leopard walked slowly past the cabinet. Its whiskers brushed against the broken glass edge, causing tiny fragments to shift slightly. The sound echoed faintly through the chamber, then disappeared into silence once more. From this room, another passage extended deeper still. This new corridor sloped downward more sharply than previous ones. The air flowing from its direction felt colder, suggesting that it reached a section of the bunker closer to the mountain's core. The leopard hesitated for a moment. In nature, deeper caves often held unknown dangers. However, no fresh scents suggested the presence of other animals. Only the smells that remained were those of old materials and time. Carefully, the animal began descending. The slope forced it to move slowly, placing each paw with precision. Along the walls, thick pipes ran downward toward lower chambers. Many pipes showed cracks along their outer layers, revealing metal surfaces beneath worn insulation. These pipes had once carried hotted water. During harsh winters, heating systems circulated warm water through the bunker, maintaining livable temperatures for personnel. Without heat, the underground rooms would have become dangerously cold, especially during long snowstorms. After the shutdown, heating systems were turned off. Water left inside pipes froze during the first winter following abandonment. Expansion of ice caused small fractures to form along pipe seams. Over many years, repeated freezing and thawing cycles widened these cracks, allowing moisture to escape slowly into surrounding spaces. The snow leopard reached the bottom of the slope. Here, the corridor widened into another chamber, unlike any room it had seen so far. The floor appeared smoother, and the walls were reinforced with thicker concrete layers. At the far end of the chamber stood a large rectangular structure built into the wall. It resembled a vault. Heavy locking bars stretched across its surface, and thick metal edges framed the opening. Though the main door remained closed, its outer surface showed signs of aging similar to other parts of the bunker. This vault had once been one of the most secure areas within the facility. Sensitive materials were stored here during operational years. These materials included classified documents, specialized instruments, and backup communication devices reserved for emergency use. Only authorized officers had access. Strict procedures controlled entry into the vault. Each opening required multiple keys and verification steps to ensure security. Detailed logs recorded the names of personnel entering and leaving the chamber. The snow leopard stepped closer to the vault door. Its nose twitched as it sniffed near the base. The scent here felt different from earlier rooms, less dusty, slightly sharper, as if sealed air remained trapped behind the thick metal barrier. Outside, the storm continued without pause. Snow piled higher against the mountain slopes, burying landmarks beneath smooth white layers. The entrance to the bunker, already hidden by debris, became even more difficult to recognize. Inside, the leopard remained deep underground, far from the changing conditions outside. Its attention stayed fixed on the mysterious vault before it. Though the door remained closed, faint marks along its edges suggested that time had slowly weakened parts of its structure. Somewhere within this sealed chamber lay items untouched for decades. And as the snow leopard stood in silence, studying the massive door, the hidden history of the bunker waited quietly behind it, protected by steel, stone, and years of forgotten secrecy.
The snow leopard stood quietly in front of the large vault door, its breath slow and steady in the cold air. The chamber felt different from the others it had explored. The air seemed heavier here, as if it had remained trapped for many years without disturbance. The thick metal door towered above the animal. Rust marked the edges, forming rough patterns across its once smooth surface. Heavy locking bars stretched across the front, fixed in place long ago. Though strong and unmoving, small cracks had formed along the outer frame, where years of pressure and shifting rock had weakened the surrounding structure. Long before abandonment, this vault had been one of the most secure spaces in the bunker. During the Cold War years, officers stored highly sensitive materials here. Inside the vault, shelves held classified documents sealed in metal containers. Backup communication units and emergency signal devices were also kept in this room, reserved for use only under strict command orders. Entry into the vault followed strict procedures. Authorized personnel carried special keys assigned only to senior officers. Before the vault could be opened, security checks were performed, and records were written into logbooks. Every movement was documented carefully to prevent unauthorized access. Now, decades later, the vault remained sealed. The snow leopard stepped closer, lowering its head to sniff near the bottom edge. A faint draft of air slipped through a thin gap between the door and its frame. The smell drifting outward felt different from the dusty air of the surrounding chamber. It carried a sharper scent, dry, stale, and slightly metallic. Curiosity drew the leopard even nearer. It placed one paw gently against the metal surface. The contact produced a soft, hollow sound that echoed faintly through the chamber. The noise faded quickly. Inside the vault, time had remained nearly frozen since the day the bunker was abandoned. During the final shutdown decades earlier, technicians had worked methodically to secure this room. Documents considered highly sensitive were removed and transported away under strict supervision. However, not everything could be taken. Large storage containers remained inside, too heavy to move quickly down steep mountain roads. Backup materials that were considered less critical were also left behind, sealed in protective cases. After completing inventory checks, officers closed the vault door and locked the heavy bars into position. That had been the last time human hands touched the lock. Over the years, natural forces slowly weakened the structure. Tiny fractures formed along the concrete frame surrounding the vault. During freezing winters, trapped moisture expanded into ice, pressing against metal surfaces. These repeated cycles caused gradual shifts in alignment. Now, standing in front of the door, the snow leopard sensed movement within the structure itself. Not movement from living beings, but the slow settling of materials responding to temperature changes. The mountain above expanded and contracted with each passing season, sending faint vibrations through the bunker's walls. The leopard leaned forward once more. Its shoulder pressed lightly against the metal. A faint creaking sound followed, deeper than before. Dust fell from the top edge of the frame, drifting downward in thin gray streams. The heavy locking bar shifted slightly. It did not fall open, but the change was enough to loosen the pressure holding the door tightly closed. A narrow crack formed along one side, just wide enough to allow a small flow of air to pass through. Cold air moved from inside the vault into the chamber. The snow leopard pulled back slightly, ears alert. The sudden change in airflow stirred loose dust across the floor. Tiny particles lifted into the air, creating faint swirling patterns that settled slowly back to the ground. Beyond the narrow crack, darkness remained unbroken. Inside the vault, shelves stood in silent rows. Metal containers rested exactly where they had been placed decades earlier. Some labels remained visible, though faded with time. Others had fallen off entirely, leaving blank surfaces that revealed nothing about their contents.
Among the stored items were emergency communication units. These devices had been designed to operate independently of the bunker's main systems. In times of crisis, they allowed personnel to send signals even if the central network failed. Their sturdy design protected internal components from dust and moisture. Nearby, sealed boxes held additional materials. Spare wiring, compact testing tools, and protective gear had been stored in organized sections. Each item had been recorded in inventory lists during the bunker's active years. Those lists, once carefully maintained, now rested forgotten among the shelves. Outside the vault chamber, the storm continued without rest. Snow piled higher across the mountain slopes, sealing cracks and openings with thick white layers. Wind swept across the ridges, reshaping the surface of the landscape hour by hour. Inside the bunker, the snow leopard remained focused on the vault door. Its curiosity had grown stronger with each new discovery. The slight opening along the frame seemed inviting, though still too narrow to entry. The leopard stepped to the side, studying the door from a different angle. Years of pressure had weakened the lower hinge. A thin line ran across the base where metal met concrete. The damage was small but noticeable, suggesting that further movement might widen the opening even more. The leopard pressed forward once more. Its shoulder touched the weakened section near the hinge. The metal groaned softly, producing a deep echo that rolled through the chamber and into distant corridors. For a moment, nothing else happened. Then, a small fragment of concrete broke loose from the frame, falling to the floor with a sharp tapping sound. The vibration loosened additional rust flakes along the hinge, causing them to scatter across the ground. The crack widened slightly. Not enough to open the vault completely, but enough to reveal deeper darkness beyond the frame. Cold air flowed steadily through the gap now, carrying scents that had been sealed away for decades. The snow leopard stepped back, observing the change. Behind the vault door lay a space that had remained untouched since the final days of the bunker's operation. Items stored within had survived years of abandonment, protected by heavy steel and deep stone. Somewhere beyond the vault chamber, additional corridors still remained unexplored. The bunker extended farther into the mountain than the leopard could yet see. Hidden rooms and forgotten equipment rested in silence, waiting for time or chance to reveal them. And as the faint crack in the vault door allowed the first steady flow of air in decades, the secret stored within the bunker moved one step closer to being uncovered.
The snow leopard stood motionless before the vault door, watching as fine dust settled across the floor. The narrow crack along the edge remained open, allowing a steady stream of cold air to escape from inside. The scent drifting outward felt stronger now, dry, metallic, and untouched by the outside world for many years. The animal stepped closer once more. Its whiskers brushed lightly against the cold metal surface. The door did not move immediately, but faint creaking sounds echoed through the chamber as pressure shifted along the weakened hinges. The mountain itself seemed to respond with soft cracking noises deep within the stone. Long ago, the vault behind this door had been carefully organized. Metal shelves lined the interior walls, arranged in precise rows. Each section had a designated purpose. Some shelves stored sealed containers filled with technical manuals, while others held backup equipment intended for emergency situations. The snow leopard pressed its shoulder gently against the lower corner again. This time, the hinge gave way slightly more. A short scraping sound followed as the heavy door shifted a few centimeters inward. Rust flakes fell like small grains of sand, scattering across the floor. The gap widened enough for the leopard to peer inside. Beyond the opening, the vault revealed shapes of tall shelves standing in darkness. Dust coated every surface, forming thick layers that softened the outlines of objects. Though untouched for decades, everything remained arranged as it had been left during the final days of operation. Inside the vault, one row of shelves held several large rectangular containers. These containers were built from reinforced metal, designed to protect their contents from moisture and physical damage. During the Cold War years, such containers often held communication components and backup signal devices. Engineers stored them carefully, ensuring they would remain functional even after long periods of storage. Another section of the vault contained stacks of sealed crates. Each crate once carried identification markings showing its purpose and location within the inventory system. Over time, many labels faded or peeled away, leaving only faint traces of writing visible along the edges. During the final shutdown decades earlier, officers had made important decisions about what to remove and what to leave behind. Highly sensitive materials were transported away under strict supervision. However, equipment considered less critical remained sealed inside the vault. The reasoning was simple. Removal required time and resources that were limited during the closing phase. Now, those remaining items rested exactly where they had been stored. The snow leopard leaned forward slightly, pressing its nose closer to the gap. The scent inside felt colder than the surrounding chamber, as though the vault had preserved its own small pocket of frozen air. With another gentle push of its shoulder, the door shifted again. A deeper creaking sound followed as the weakened hinge struggled to hold the heavy weight. The movement was slow but noticeable. The gap widened just enough for the leopard to slip its head partially inside. Its eyes adjusted to the deeper darkness. Within the vault, a tall cabinet stood near the center. Its doors were closed, though one side showed signs of bending from years of pressure. Dust covered the surface so completely that the original paint color was barely visible. Nearby, several metal cases rested on a lower shelf. These cases had once been used to store portable radio units. During emergency operations, such units allowed personnel to communicate even if the main systems failed. Their durable construction protected delicate components from rough handling and environmental damage. Outside the vault chamber, distant sounds echoed faintly through the bunker. Somewhere far above, snow continued to pile against the mountain slopes. The storm showed no signs of stopping. Heavy winds forced loose snow into cracks along the bunker entrance, sealing it more completely with each passing hour. Inside, the snow leopard continued exploring the vault opening. It shifted its weight carefully, placing one paw through the gap. The floor inside felt solid beneath its claws. Encouraged, the animal pushed its body slightly forward. The door groaned once more. A section of rusted metal broke free from the hinge and dropped to the floor with a sharp clink. The vibration echoed through the chamber, traveling along walls and into distant corridors. For a brief moment, the structure settled again into silence. Now, the vault opening stood wide enough for the leopard to enter. Slowly, it moved forward, slipping its body through the gap and into the long sealed chamber. Dust rose gently around its paws as it stepped inside, disturbing surfaces untouched for decades. Within the vault, the air felt colder than anywhere else in the bunker. The temperature difference came from the thick metal walls that had blocked airflow for many years. Without regular circulation, the chamber had remained insulated from outside changes. The snow leopard turned its head slowly, scanning the rows of shelves. On one side, a collection of cylindrical containers stood stacked neatly. These containers once held spare electrical wiring and protective coverings used during maintenance operations. Many remained sealed, their contents preserved within. Across from them, several heavy binders lay stacked along a metal table. These binders once contained technical diagrams showing the layout of communication systems throughout the bunker. Engineers relied on these diagrams to repair faults and trace connections between different rooms. Though dust covered their surfaces, the binders remained mostly intact. In another corner of the vault, a narrow passage extended beyond the main storage area. Unlike earlier corridors, this passage appeared unfinished, with rough stone walls visible along its sides. It suggested that engineers had planned further expansion at some point, but never completed the work. The snow leopard noticed the opening and turned toward it. Curiosity guided its movement once again. Each new discovery inside the bunker seemed to lead deeper into hidden sections that few humans had likely seen even during the facility's active years. Outside, the storm reached greater intensity. Snow covered the mountains in thick layers, smoothing rough surfaces and hiding natural landmarks beneath soft white blankets. The world above grew quieter, muffled by falling snow and steady wind. Deep inside the mountain, however, the exploration continued. The leopard stepped toward the narrow, unfinished passage, leaving behind fresh tracks inside the vault that marked the first movement in that chamber in decades. Ahead lay another unknown section of the forgotten Cold War bunker, one that had remained hidden not only from nature, but even from many of the people who once worked within these walls.
The snow leopard stood motionless before the vault door, watching as fine dust settled across the floor. The narrow crack along the edge remained open, allowing a steady stream of cold air to escape from inside. The scent drifting outward felt stronger now, dry, metallic, and untouched by the outside world for many years. The animal stepped closer once more. Its whiskers brushed lightly against the cold metal surface. The door did not move immediately, but faint creaking sounds echoed through the chamber as pressure shifted along the weakened hinges. The mountain itself seemed to respond with soft cracking noises deep within the stone. Long ago, the vault behind the store had been carefully organized. Metal shelves lined the interior walls, arranged in precise rows. Each section had a designated purpose. Some shelves stored sealed containers filled with technical manuals, while others held backup equipment intended for emergency situations. The snow leopard pressed its shoulder gently against the lower corner again. This time, the hinge gave way slightly more. A short scraping sound followed as the heavy door shifted a few centimeters inward. Rust flakes fell like small grains of sand, scattering across the floor. The gap widened enough for the leopard to peer inside. Beyond the opening, the vault revealed shapes of tall shelves standing in darkness. Dust coated every surface, forming thick layers that softened the outlines of objects. Though untouched for decades, everything remained arranged as it had been left during the final days of operation. Inside the vault, one row of shelves held several large rectangular containers. These containers were built from reinforced metal, designed to protect their contents from moisture and physical damage. During the Cold War years, such containers often held communication components and backup signal devices. Engineers stored them carefully, ensuring they would remain functional even after long periods of storage. Another section of the vault contained stacks of sealed crates. Each crate once carried identification markings showing its purpose and location within the inventory system. Over time, many labels faded or peeled away, leaving only faint traces of writing visible along the edges. During the final shutdown decades earlier, officers had made important decisions about what to remove and what to leave behind. Highly sensitive materials were transported away under strict supervision. However, equipment considered less critical remained sealed inside the vault.
The reasoning was simple. Removal required time and resources that were limited during the closing phase. Now, those remaining items rested exactly where they had been stored. The snow leopard leaned forward slightly, pressing its nose closer to the gap. The scent inside felt colder than the surrounding chamber, as though the vault had preserved its own small pocket of frozen air. With another gentle push of its shoulder, the door shifted again. A deeper creaking sound followed as the weakened hinge struggled to hold the heavy weight. The movement was slow but noticeable. The gap widened just enough for the leopard to slip its head partially inside. Its eyes adjusted to the deeper darkness. Within the vault, a tall cabinet stood near the center. Its doors were closed, though one side showed signs of bending from years of pressure. Dust covered the surface so completely that the original paint color was barely visible. Nearby, several metal cases rested on a lower shelf. These cases had once been used to store portable radio units. During emergency operations, such units allowed personnel to communicate even if the main systems failed. Their durable construction protected delicate components from rough handling and environmental damage. Outside the vault chamber, distant sounds echoed faintly through the bunker. Somewhere far above, snow continued to pile against the mountain slopes. The storm showed no signs of stopping. Heavy winds forced loose snow into cracks along the bunker entrance, sealing it more completely with each passing hour. Inside, the snow leopard continued exploring the vault opening. It shifted its weight carefully, placing one paw through the gap. The floor inside felt solid beneath its claws. Encouraged, the animal pushed its body slightly forward. The door groaned once more. A section of rusted metal broke free from the hinge and dropped to the floor with a sharp clink. The vibration echoed through the chamber, traveling along walls and into distant corridors. For a brief moment, the structure settled again into silence. Now the vault opening stood wide enough for the leopard to enter. Slowly, it moved forward, slipping its body through the gap and into the long, sealed chamber. Dust rose gently around its paws as it stepped inside, disturbing surfaces untouched for decades. Inside the vault, the air felt colder than anywhere else in the bunker. The temperature difference came from the thick metal walls that had blocked airflow for many years. Without regular circulation, the chamber had remained insulated from outside changes. The snow leopard turned its head slowly, scanning the rows of shelves. On one side, a collection of cylindrical containers stood stacked neatly. These containers once held spare electrical wiring and protective coverings used during maintenance operations. Many remained sealed, their contents preserved within. Across from them, several heavy binders lay stacked along a metal table. These binders once contained technical diagrams showing the layout of communication systems throughout the bunker. Engineers relied on these diagrams to repair faults and trace connections between different rooms. Though dust covered their surfaces, the binders remained mostly intact. In another corner of the vault, a narrow passage extended beyond the main storage area. Unlike earlier corridors, this passage appeared unfinished, with rough stone walls visible along its sides. It suggested that engineers had planned further expansion at some point, but never completed the work. The snow leopard noticed the opening and turned toward it. Curiosity guided its movement once again. Each new discovery inside the bunker seemed to lead deeper into hidden sections that few humans likely saw even during the facility's active years. Outside, the storm reached greater intensity. Snow covered the mountains in thick layers, smoothing rough surfaces and hiding natural landmarks beneath soft white blankets. The world above grew quieter, muffled by falling snow and steady wind.
Deep inside the mountain, however, the exploration continued. The leopard stepped toward the narrow, unfinished passage, leaving behind fresh tracks inside the vault that marked the first movement in that chamber in decades. Ahead lay another unknown section of the forgotten Cold War bunker, one that had remained hidden not only from nature, but even from many of the people who once worked within these walls.
The snow leopard stepped slowly toward the narrow, unfinished passage at the back of the vault. The air inside this smaller corridor felt colder and more still than anywhere else it had traveled. Rough stone walls surrounded the passage, unlike the smooth, reinforced concrete seen in earlier rooms. Dust lay thick along the floor, untouched for decades. The leopard lowered its head and sniffed near the ground. The scent here was different again, less metallic than the vault and more like bare rock and damp stone. Tiny fragments of gravel shifted under its paws as it moved forward. This passage had once been part of an expansion project. During the later years of the bunker's operation, engineers had planned to increase the facility's storage capacity. New areas were proposed to hold additional communication equipment and emergency supplies. The growing complexity of Cold War technology required more space for backup systems and replacement parts. Work on this extension began carefully. Teams drilled into the rock, creating the rough tunnel that now stretched ahead of the snow leopard. Unlike the earlier sections, which were fully reinforced, this area remained incomplete. Construction materials had been delivered but never fully installed. Then, before the work could be finished, the Cold War began to change. Political agreements and shifting strategies reduced the need for expanding remote bunkers. Funding for new construction slowed. Orders eventually arrived to halt work on several unfinished projects, including this one. When the shutdown order reached this mountain facility, the expansion tunnel was left exactly as it was. Tools, building materials, and partially installed supports remained in place. Engineers recorded notes about the unfinished work, but those records were stored elsewhere and eventually forgotten as the bunker closed. Now, decades later, the snow leopard continued forward into that abandoned space. The tunnel sloped gently downward. Along the sides, wooden support beams stood at intervals, holding sections of the ceiling where rock had been weakened by drilling. Some beams had cracked with age, though most still remained standing. On the floor, several objects lay scattered. Long metal rods rested against the wall. These rods had once been intended to reinforce the tunnel with concrete lining. Nearby, empty cement bags lay collapsed into thin sheets, their printed markings nearly erased by moisture and time. The leopard stepped carefully between the scattered materials. A faint clinking sound followed as its paw brushed against a loose metal bolt. The sound echoed softly through the narrow passage, carrying forward into the darkness ahead. Farther along, the tunnel widened slightly. Here, several large crates remained stacked along one wall. Unlike the organized storage areas seen earlier, these crates appeared unfinished and partially opened. Their wooden lids had warped over time, leaving narrow gaps along the edges. Inside those crates were construction supplies. Steel brackets, wiring bundles, and protective panels had been delivered before work stopped. Workers had planned to use these materials to complete the reinforcement of the tunnel and install electrical systems. But when operations ended, those materials were never used. The snow leopard paused beside one of the crates. It sniffed the edge cautiously, detecting faint traces of chemicals once used to treat the wood against moisture. Though weakened by time, the crate remained solid enough to hold its shape. Beyond the stacked crates, the tunnel sloped gently downward. Cold air drifted upward from below, carrying faint echoes from unseen spaces farther ahead. The sound was not loud, just the distant shifting of air moving through cracks deep inside the mountain. Long ago, engineers had intended this tunnel to connect to a secondary emergency shelter. Such shelters were designed as fallback areas in case the main bunker became damaged or blocked.
They included basic supplies such as water storage tanks, simple sleeping areas, and emergency communication links. However, records suggest that this secondary shelter was only partially completed. The snow leopard continued descending. Its muscles tensed slightly as the ground became steeper. The rough surface required careful footing. Small stones rolled beneath its paws, producing quiet clicking sounds that echoed down the tunnel. At the bottom of the slope, the passage opened into a wider chamber. This room looked different from the earlier vault and storage areas. The walls remained unfinished, showing natural rock surfaces where drilling had stopped abruptly. Several large metal frames stood upright, waiting to be filled with concrete that was never poured. In one corner of the chamber stood a tall cylindrical tank. Unlike the polished fuel tanks in the generator room, this one appeared newly installed at the time construction ended. Pipes connected to its base, though many of them remained incomplete. This tank had been designed to store fresh water. Emergency planning required reliable water supplies deep underground. Engineers installed large storage tanks capable of holding thousands of liters of water. In this unfinished shelter area, at least one such tank had been placed before construction halted. The snow leopard walked slowly around the tank. Its whiskers brushed lightly against the cold metal surface. A faint hollow sound echoed as the tank responded to the gentle touch. Nearby, a row of simple metal frames stood along one wall. These frames were the beginnings of simple metal bunks intended for emergency shelter use. Without mattresses or coverings, they appeared skeletal and incomplete, evidence of work stopped before it could be finished. The snow leopard paused in the center of the unfinished chamber. Its ears lifted as it listened to the faint sound of moving air. Somewhere beyond this room, the tunnel seemed to continue even farther into the mountain. Outside, the storm raged across the peaks. Heavy snow buried the bunker entrance more deeply than before, sealing the outside world behind thick frozen layers. Wind roared across ridges, but none of those sounds reached the deep interior spaces where the leopard now stood. Inside this unfinished section, time felt frozen. Everything remained exactly as workers had left it decades earlier. Tools waiting to be used, structures waiting to be completed, and plans waiting to be carried out. The snow leopard turned its head toward the far end of the chamber. A darker opening marked the continuation of the tunnel, leading into an even deeper part of the mountain that likely saw very little human activity even during the bunker's operation. With quiet curiosity, the leopard prepared to move forward again. Ahead lay the deepest section of the forgotten Cold War bunker, an area that held the final hidden spaces left behind when history changed and the mountain facility was abandoned forever.
The snow leopard advanced carefully into the deeper passage, its paws making soft sounds against the uneven concrete floor. The narrow tunnel stretched forward, curving slightly as it descended farther into the mountain. The air here was colder and drier than in any previous chamber, carrying faint traces of stone, rust, and old metal. This part of the bunker had been almost entirely untouched. During the Cold War, only a handful of engineers and technicians had ventured into these sections. The primary focus had been the control room, generator chamber, and main storage areas. Deeper passages were used sparingly, mostly for planned expansions or emergency purposes. Now, decades later, the snow leopard moved through a place frozen in time. Along the walls, rough stone surfaces alternated with incomplete concrete reinforcements. Pipes ran overhead, many cracked or broken from decades of freezing and thawing. A few wires hung loosely, dangling like skeletal remnants of the electrical systems that had never been fully installed. After a short walk, the tunnel opened into another chamber. This room was larger than the unfinished sections behind it, though it remained rough and unpolished. The floor sloped slightly downward, and the walls showed evidence of drilling and reinforcement that had stopped midway. Dust covered the surfaces, untouched for years, while small piles of debris rested in corners where construction materials had been abandoned. Near the center of the chamber, a large metal frame stood upright. It appeared to have been the skeleton of an equipment rack intended to hold critical communication devices.
Bolts and brackets remained attached, though the devices themselves were never installed. Engineers had likely planned to expand this room into a secondary operational center, but work ceased before it could be completed. In another corner, a stack of metal crates rested against the wall. These crates contained spare parts, connectors, wires, and small mechanical components that were meant for the unfinished sections of the bunker. Some crates had warped over the years, allowing their contents to shift and settle, but nothing had been removed. Each piece remained exactly as engineers had left it decades earlier. A narrow corridor led further down from the chamber. The snow leopard followed it cautiously, its whiskers brushed against rough stone surfaces as it moved forward, ears flicking to catch any sound. Faint echoes of distant drafts filled the air, suggesting that the mountain itself was slowly settling around the abandoned spaces. This deeper section had been designed as an emergency access route. Engineers had planned passages connecting the main bunker to hidden chambers farther within the mountain. These routes would allow personnel to move quickly between areas during crises. However, the majority of these passages were never completed, and only partially finished tunnels remained. Along the corridor, several small openings appeared in the walls. Some of these were niches meant for storage. Others seemed to be access points for ventilation or emergency wiring. Over time, ice and water seeped through cracks, leaving thin frost along edges and pooling slightly in depressions on the floor. The snow leopard stepped carefully around these obstacles. Its body moved with precision, avoiding loose debris and slick surfaces. The faint light from the entrance had long faded, leaving the animal's excellent night vision to guide it through the darkness. At the far end of the passage, the tunnel opened into the deepest chamber yet explored. This room felt different from all others. It was cooler, darker, and almost completely sealed from drafts. Concrete walls were reinforced, though rough stone protruded in places. The floor was uneven but solid, and no dust had been disturbed here until now. In the center of the chamber, a large sealed container stood upright. Unlike the crates and equipment racks seen earlier, this container was entirely intact. Its metal surface was coated with rust, yet it retained its original shape. Engineers had likely placed it here to protect valuable materials, perhaps documents, instruments, or backup systems intended for emergency use. Around the container, the walls bore faint markings. Lines and symbols had been scratched into the concrete, likely by workers during construction. These marks may have served as guides for alignment, measurements, or placement of future equipment. Over decades, the meaning of these markings faded, leaving only abstract patterns visible today. The snow leopard approached the container carefully. Its nose twitched as it sniffed along the surface, detecting faint odors of metal and chemicals. The scent suggested that the container had been sealed tightly, preserving its contents despite decades of abandonment. Every sound in the chamber echoed softly. The tapping of the leopard's paws against the floor and the faint creak of rusted metal were amplified by the enclosed space. The quiet stillness of this hidden section contrasted sharply with the storm raging outside the mountain. The animal circled the container slowly. Its senses remained alert. Though no other life signs existed in this isolated part of the bunker, the space itself seemed alive with history, silent testimony to human effort, secrecy, and the passage of time. Beyond this chamber, additional corridors extended even farther into the mountain. While unfinished and partially blocked by construction materials, these tunnels hinted at the vast scale of the bunker. Engineers had intended for the facility to stretch deep and wide, though most plans were never realized. The snow leopard paused, its gaze fixed on the sealed container. Inside rested the final remnants of a forgotten era, a relic of the Cold War, preserved beneath layers of stone, concrete, and decades of silence. The exploration had reached one of the deepest, most hidden points in the mountain bunker, a place where history had been trapped and waiting for discovery.
The snow leopard lingered in the deepest chamber, its eyes adjusting to the dim light filtering through the small gaps in the rock. The air was sharp and cold, carrying a faint metallic tang from the sealed container in the center of the room. Here, the silence was complete, so profound that even the softest breath of wind from the distant entrance could barely be felt. This chamber had been the final section of the bunker completed before the shutdown. Engineers had designed it as a secure storage and emergency operations room meant to house the most sensitive equipment and documents. Every wall was reinforced, every corner carefully measured, and the container at its center had been placed with precision to ensure protection against natural disasters, pressure shifts, and potential intrusions. Decades earlier, human presence here had been minimal. Only a handful of technicians had entered this part of the bunker during inspections or to place critical supplies. Workers left notes on concrete walls, scratched marks indicating alignment points, or measurements for future installations. These small human traces remained, faint but visible, like echoes of lives that once occupied the mountain's secret depths. The snow leopard moved closer to the container. Its nose hovered just above the cold metal surface, sniffing faint residues of oil, rust, and chemicals. The smell was old, unchanging, yet unmistakably linked to the purpose of the room, preservation.
The container had been designed to keep contents safe, and it had succeeded, resisting decay and intrusion for decades. Nearby, the walls held subtle evidence of construction efforts never completed. Partially drilled holes, rough stone edges, and unfinished support beams marked where expansion had been intended. Engineers had planned additional storage racks, small control consoles, and emergency exits, but the end of the Cold War halted all construction. What remained was a frozen snapshot of their intentions, preserved exactly as they had left it. The snow leopard stepped slowly around the chamber. Its paws disturbed only the thin layer of dust and small pebbles scattered across the floor. Each movement echoed softly, revealing the vast emptiness of the space. In this quiet, every sound seemed amplified, and the leopard's senses were alert to even the slightest vibration. Outside, the storm continued to rage. Snow drifted across mountain ridges, covering the bunker entrance entirely. The wind howled across frozen peaks, but none of that reached the sealed chamber. The mountain itself acted as a natural barrier, keeping the bunker insulated from time and weather. Within the chamber, history remained untouched. The container held items no human eye had seen in decades. Documents, equipment, and backup materials, all of it preserved, silent witnesses to a tense period in global history. The bunker had served its purpose once, to protect, to monitor, and to prepare for emergencies. Now it existed only as a monument to secrecy and human foresight. The snow leopard paused at the center, looking around the chamber one last time. It had traced the journey from the entrance tunnels, through storage rooms, the generator area, the central control room, and finally to this deepest chamber. Each step revealed more of the mountain's hidden story, rooms frozen in time, equipment left behind, and the echoes of people who had once worked tirelessly under secrecy. In the quiet darkness, the snow leopard became the first living creature in decades to traverse the bunker fully. Its tracks marked the floor as it moved, leaving an ephemeral record of exploration across the still-preserved interior. The journey through the abandoned Cold War bunker, from entrance to vault to the deepest hidden chambers, was complete, unveiling a forgotten past sealed beneath mountains and snow. Outside, the storm continued, relentless and indifferent. Inside, the bunker remained, a frozen time capsule preserving history in silence, waiting for any who might discover it. And the snow leopard, now fully within its depths, carried forward the story of a place long forgotten by the world above, yet etched forever in stone, metal, and memory. The secret of the Cold War bunker had endured, hidden in remote Asia until this moment of rediscovery.